This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The DR Congo marches in support of efforts to eradicate Ebola epidemic. Wildlife Summit votes to regulate giraffes and endangered species trade. African Americans search for roots in Ghana. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. In business, Egypt's Monetary Policy Committee cuts rates for the first time in 6 months after inflation relief. And in sports, Ghana remembers late Black Star striker Junior Agogo. We start in the DRC, where politicians, health officials, civil society groups, and private sector associations have held a march in support of efforts to combat Ebola in the city of Goma. The epidemic has killed at least 1,900 people in the Democratic Republic of Congo over the past year, the second biggest toll in the disease's history. CGTN's Michael Karanja with the details.
Hundreds gathered in Congo's eastern city to support Ebola response teams that have seen increasing attacks and resistance among communities where Ebola continues to spread. Organizers of the march say that anyone spreading misinformation will face arrest. They promise more marches and initiatives to raise awareness in other parts of the province, including Beni and Butembo, where Ebola has also spread.
The disease started in Beni, but today it has reached Goma and even South Kivu, precisely because we missed one important thing: community engagement. And that's why I congratulate and thank everyone who took part in the walk.
Ebola was first discovered in Congo in 1976. It spreads through direct contact with bodily fluids and typically kills roughly half of those it infects. The mortality rate is closer to 2/3 during the current outbreak because so many victims in the DRC have failed to seek treatment.
We need to fight this epidemic so that the disease does not affect anyone in our neighborhoods. We must sensitize the people in every corner of the city of Goma. We must fight together and respect the rules of hygiene that the health services ask us to observe.
The World Health Organization says it has vaccinated over 1,300 people who potentially came into contact with the Ebola virus in the Congolese city of Goma. This has helped in containing what many fear would have been a rapid spread in the urban center. No new confirmed cases have, however, been reported in Goma this month, but Congolese authorities have confirmed a new case of Ebola in the remote militia-controlled province of Walikale.
This disease is killing our people. Ebola is not an individual affair. It is everyone's business. That's why we are appealing to the world and telling everyone in the city of Goma and across the province that we need to stop its spread.
The widening geographic spread of the virus and its presence in yet another zone under the sway of armed groups raises the risk of it spreading out of control. The use of an experimental Ebola vaccine has proven to be a key weapon, although reaching contacts in rural areas beset by violence has proven difficult. Michael Karanja, CGTN.
Well, for more on the story, we are joined by CGTN's Leon Sayenga in Kimbondo on the outskirts of Kinshasa. Leon, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. From all indication, it seems the government is winning the battle against Ebola with the awareness campaign and, of course, this march. I guess the question that surely needs to be asked is what more can be done to prevent attacks and resistance among communities where Ebola continues to spread? Leon.
Well, there's certainly been a lot that has been done, at least over the period of 12 months and a couple of days since the first confirmed case of Ebola in August last year. Therein, of course, has been very much so the level of awareness that has been put in around the air communities that have been affected. But even still, vaccination of people in these affected areas has come through as very, very helpful. But yes, awareness, like you said there earlier, is a very important issue. What much more can the government do? Well, we've been told that just this week the government okayed another vaccine for Ebola, and this, of course, I think will help quite a lot in trying to curb the spread of this particular virus. But yes, that is very much so what the government can do. The strategies have been intense. There have been quite a lot of support from several partners, the government itself, and even also the neighboring countries to ensure that the spread of Ebola is actually curbed and well, limited. So definitely there's quite a lot that has been done, and even still the bigger cause here should definitely be awareness.
Great insights. We'll talk more about the vaccinations a little later, but let's talk about the signing of the bilateral agreement in Bukavu by the governor of South Kivu and his Rwandan counterpart in the Western province. How is that going to help prevent the spread of Ebola? Leon.
Well, the bigger issue here, of course, is the sharing of information between the two the areas, that is Rwanda and the side of the DR Congo that signed this particular agreement. It, of course, comes out as very important to the fact that the spread of Ebola has been with the particular issue of mistrust among communities. So just in case people know that person X or person Y has contracted Ebola, then definitely the sharing of that information will try and get health officials running quick to ensure that that person does not spread it much further. So that is very important, that particular aspect. But yes, the march on Thursday came out as a very big issue. The communities therein trying to show as much support towards trying to do their own part in ensuring that they help out in ending this particular epidemic, which, yes, has at least this month has had great headway in ensuring that it can, at least there's a possibility that it can be brought to an end, of course, with the introduction of the drugs, and now, of course, the vaccines, and very much so the level of awareness. So the communities therein are putting just as much effort to ensure that they can bring this to an end.
All right, Leon, you speak of drugs, you speak of vaccinations. Talk to us about how the reaction has been to that.
Well, of course, the announcement of the new drugs was met with quite a great deal of positivity. It comes in at a point in time where several lives have been lost. Close to 1,900 lives have been lost to Ebola in this particular epidemic that has lasted about 12 months. So, yes, it comes through as a promising step towards ending this particular epidemic. The government says that it will have enough doses by the pharmaceutical company that has set out to provide this particular drugs, and definitely they are confident that everybody that has contracted Ebola will be treated and possibly definitely be able to heal from this particular scourge. But of course, like I said earlier, there have been quite a lot of challenges in this particular fight. Of course, the mistrust from the communities that have been affected by Ebola. Many of the people, they are preferring to treat their people from home. This has been a very big challenge. And of course, the violence, the militia groups that are in particular areas have affected the treatment and the ability to deal with Ebola. So even still, the drugs are a very big headway, and also now the vaccination that has been topped up, we believe will add quite a lot in trying to ensure that at least at this point in time, Ebola is brought to an end.
All right, Leon Nta, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us here on Africa Live. That's Leon Nta talking to us from Kinshasa. Excellent reporting there. Moving on, conservationists have been pushing for the prevention of the silent extinction of the African giraffe. A vote taken in a key committee of the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species has been passed to regulate international trade in giraffes for the first time and endangered species. CGTN's Brian Toussaint has that story.
An overwhelming 106 parties to the UN-backed treaty voted in favor of the giraffe motion. The decision is expected to be endorsed at a plenary next week, with requirements to be enforced 30 days later. Countries now have to determine the status of the species on their territories and provide global trade data.
So this was a huge win for the giraffes, especially because the species has been declining. They've declined about 40% over the last 30 years, and there's only about 68,000 mature individuals remaining in the world, and they're really in trouble. And so many people have dubbed this the sort of silent extinction.
The decrease in population of the African giraffe stems from a number of things, including the encroachment by humans into the animal's natural habitat. Ecological changes, civil unrest, and local conflicts further complicate conservation efforts, and illegal hunting is also another major threat.
Giraffe is in the wild much rarer than the African elephant. Much rarer. There are far less giraffes than African elephants. That be clear. We're talking about a few tens of thousands of giraffes, and we're talking about a few hundreds of thousands of African elephants. So we need to be careful.
Meanwhile, the African elephant also came under the spotlight as a debate emerged on the controlled sales of ivory.
It's a very important message. On elephants, the message is ivory is really over. Ivory markets have to close, and there should be no more ivory trade forever. If we want elephants to recover and increase populations and survive, not just in southern Africa, but across Africa, we have to keep the ivory trade closed forever. And on giraffes, it's a warning. People think of giraffes and they think they're abundant everywhere in Africa, and they're not. So keep an eye on the giraffe situation as well.
But in recognition of conservation efforts, countries rejected a motion that would have transferred southern African elephants to Appendix 1, banning trade. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
Still on wildlife, a Rothschild's giraffe at Kenya's Lake Nakuru National Park has been treated for a bone tumor. A veterinary team from the Kenya Wildlife Service has, however, decided against operating on the animal to remove the tumor, as the procedure could lead to further complications. The photograph of the giraffe with a swarm of flies buzzing around its swollen eye shocked the country, causing conservationists to urge the Kenya Wildlife Service to find the giraffe and act quickly. The veterinary team administered palliative treatment comprising of antibiotics and anti-inflammatory drugs. They will also monitor the rare giraffe, one of only 609 Rothschild giraffes in Kenya, according to the last giraffe census. And in South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa has vowed to act against anyone that was involved in misconduct during a controversial fundraising for his campaign to become ANC party leader. His campaign was again pushed into the spotlight last week after financial details, including donors and beneficiaries, that were leaked to the media. The country's ethics watchdog accuses him of misleading Parliament over a $36,000 donation. It links the funding to money laundering.
Please give me that letter and I will reflect on it.
It's been less than a year since Cyril Ramaphosa came into power, but is already facing questions over the funding of his bitterly fought campaign to become ANC president. The 66-year-old leader is challenging the order in court.
Now, I need to say the CR17 campaign was a legitimate, forward-looking and necessary effort to promote the renewal of the governing party and broader society, and it was undertaken under difficult conditions. In its funding and its activities, there was no wrongdoing. Let me repeat, no wrongdoing, no criminality, and no abuse of public funds or resources.
The country's public prosecutor, Busiswe Mekobwane, had ordered him to disclose details of all his campaign funders. But this has been Ramaphosa's reply.
If there were members of the executive who were part of the campaign who were involved in fundraising, they did so as individual party members, exercising their democratic and constitutional right. And in this regard, let us be clear, they owe no apology for what they did.
Ramaphosa led the ANC to victory in May elections on a ticket of clean governance after Jacob Zuma was ousted following widespread allegations of graft. But with the ongoing graft allegations, it is clear damage to his zero-tolerance approach to corruption has already been done. Chamgono, CGTN.
And on to Somalia now, where authorities have announced a major security reshuffle targeting the army, police, and intelligence. A new mayor of Mogadishu was also appointed days after the former city mayor was killed in an al-Shabaab attack inside his offices. From Mogadishu, CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo has this story.
It's the third major security reshuffle in less than 3 years as the Somali government seeks to contain an ever-increasing threat from militant groups operating in the country. In a cabinet session on Thursday, the Council of Ministers met in the capital, Mogadishu, to announce changes to the armed forces, including police, army, intelligence, and prison services. General Odawa Yusuf Rage was appointed as the overall head of the country's military, replacing Major General Dahir Adan Ilmi, who held that post for less than a year. Rage becomes the youngest chief of defense forces in the country's history. A new police chief was also appointed as the country struggles to return law and order after years of lawlessness. Fahad Yassin was also elevated to become the country's spy chief after serving in an acting capacity in that position for the past 10 months.
The Council of Ministers praised the outgoing heads of armed forces for doing a commendable job in pacifying territories previously under al-Shabaab control. The changes were made so as to improve and empower the ongoing operations being spearheaded by our security forces.
President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo, in a surprise move, appointed Omar Mahmoud Mohamed as the new governor of the Benadir region, who also becomes the mayor of Mogadishu. Mohamed's appointment comes 3 weeks after the death of Abdurrahman Omar Usman, who succumbed to injuries sustained in a suicide blast at his offices in July. A female suicide bomber detonated explosives at a security gathering at the heavily fortified mayor's office, killing at least 13 people, among them 3 district heads and 10 other senior local government officials. The government in Mogadishu hopes that the latest security reshuffle will boost its fight against militant groups in the country. Last month, al-Shabaab carried out deadly attacks in 2 major Somali cities, killing more than 60 people. However, such deadly attacks are limited to major cities. In recent months, special forces from the country's military have been able to seize and hold new territories in southern and central Somalia. Earlier this month, troops recaptured Odigle, a rich agricultural town south of the capital. Al-Shabaab later detonated 2 deadly car bombs and launched a ground offensive in an attempt to retake Odigle but failed. Authorities now hope that recent successes recorded on the battlefield will be replicated in major cities following the latest security shakeup. Abdulaziz Billo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Thank you for staying with us on Africa Live. The news continues. Here's a look at what's ahead. The United Nations warns against drought linked to climate change in South Sudan. And Nigeria close to attaining polio-free status.
Horse racing in Mauritius is like a shocker in Europe, you know.
You keep learning every day in this game. No one can say that he knows all. There is a saying in racing that good horses make good jockeys. I believe good horses make also good trainers.
You know, horses are very lovely animals. You have to connect with them, you know, or else we wouldn't be doing it. And the hard work that we put into the horses, yeah, you have to, a lot of it's love.
I love them as my kids. For horse, for kids, same. I give them same care, same love, same affection.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. The United Nations says droughts linked to climate change are going to hit vulnerable populations the hardest, especially communities in war-torn countries such as South Sudan. However, South Sudan's government insists that when peace returns to the country, the food security situation will improve. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
Climate-related drought has not spared this part of South Sudan. Lair is locked in a vicious cycle of famine and climate change, compounded by an overwhelming refugee crisis. And Lair's ongoing food crisis represents just one of many crippling challenges that South Sudan is facing.
Drought seriously also affects issues of nutrition because people will not be able to cultivate and produce enough vegetable, produce enough food. Even the cattle will die, we will not be able to produce enough milk.
The UN says more than half the population of South Sudan is projected to face acute food shortages. The problem is not just drought, since some parts of the country do experience too much rain.
When it rains quite heavily, the places are all flooded, and you know we have a lot of mosquitoes. And then when they are exposed, then they get malaria. And with a weaker immunity system, then they become more vulnerable.
Experts say acute food shortages lead to the stunting of growth in children, which in turn makes the likelihood of death much higher. But South Sudan's government insists it is working to improve food security.
Information systems will be maintained, and the food security situation will continue to be monitored in real time to ensure timely decisions are made to respond to the deteriorating food security and nutrition situation.
But some children in the country are already dropping out of school as getting food gets more difficult.
The government says it plans to introduce programs that promote agriculture once peace returns to the country, and that it hopes this will help alleviate the crisis as well as help people grow their own crops to make them less reliant on outside food sources. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Nigeria is close to attaining a polio-free status after marking 3 years since its last reported case of wild polio virus. Health experts say it's a significant milestone that could lead to the entire continent being declared polio-free. Before now, Nigeria had held the unenviable record of being one of 3 countries in the world where the polio disease is still endemic. Here is CGTN's Deji Batmas with more on that story.
The news is a very big deal for Nigeria if you consider the fact that just about 7 months ago, the country accounted for more than half of the world's polio cases. But with no report of a single case of the wild polio virus since 2016, Nigeria is now on the verge of being declared polio-free.
This is a monumental achievement towards the health and well-being of children throughout the country. It has been a hard, long, and at times trying road to reach this milestone, but one that has been worth every step. And we as UNICEF are proud to be an integral part of this journey with the government of Nigeria and all other partners.
Nigeria's battle against the polio virus had been seriously hindered by the Boko Haram insurgency in the country's northeast, where the last case of the virus was reported in 2016. Health workers had found it almost impossible to access the area for vaccination. But with the military succeeding in beating back the insurgents over the past 3 years, the situation has since changed, with health workers able to vaccinate many more under 5 children than before. Authorities had also massively scaled up the polio vaccination program across the country as well, reaching an unprecedented number of children.
Despite this significant progress, ending all forms of polio across the region remains an unfinished success story. The low immunization rates pose a major risk to other forms of polio virus outbreaks. Furthermore, inaccessibility to some children pose also a threat to sustain the recent gains.
Their warnings health authorities in Nigeria are taking very seriously, pledging not to let down their guards.
Polio campaigns
will therefore continue in the current tempo and intensity to ensure that children and our environment are protected against all types of the polio virus, while further strengthening routine immunization against vaccine-preventable diseases. The implementation of Immunization Plus Days, IPDs, where we deliver oral polio vaccines to children under 5 years of age, irrespective of their immunization status, will continue even beyond 2020. This is aimed at boosting the population immunity in order to maintain polio WPV-free status.
If Nigeria could sustain or even scale up its current effort in the fight against the disease and remain without a single case of polio over the next few months, the World Health Organization would officially declare the country polio-free, and that in turn could set the entire continent on the path of being declared polio-free as well. Deji Badmore, CGTN, Lagos.
Staying in Nigeria, violence in northern Nigeria is depriving millions of children of the chance to quality education. UNICEF says 1 in every 5 of the world's out-of-school children is in Nigeria. CGTN's Samson O'Malley reports on how insecurity in north and central Nigeria is impacting the lives of children.
It's been 10 years since the Boko Haram insurgency began in northern Nigeria. Violence by herders and farmers who want more grazing field is also on the steady rise in central Nigeria, resulting in huge number of displaced persons. Children in this region have been severely affected as they are unable to go to school. In northeast Nigeria alone, at least 496 classrooms have been destroyed. Activists warn that if the violence continues, children and schools face real threats to their long-term future.
Once people are not well informed, people are not well educated, they recycle them into the system that is not admissible for productive engagement. Even economically, it also means that a great number of coming up youth will also be disempowered. They will not be able to tap into the global economy. And at the end of the day, the circle of poverty continue and the circle of ignorance also continue.
The central challenge is how to give children access to education in areas overrun by violence.
You don't just dump them in IDP camp or in resettlement camp or just take them back and dump them. You must be able to recreate a conducive atmosphere for constructive education, for informative education that will also help these people to revive their life and live a more positive life.
One organization is providing free education to internally displaced children, as well as accommodation and access to health care and food.
We care for them like we care for our children. We supply all their needs. We, buy their uniforms. We make their sweaters. They don't pay any school fees. We feed them. Children play after they want to eat some snacks and all of. We do all of that. Whatever we do with our children, that is what we do with these children.
Despite these efforts, the lack of safe and quality education for vulnerable children in northern Nigeria is threatening the future dreams of these young Nigerians. Samson O'Malley, CGTN, Jos, Nigeria.
African Americans are trooping to Ghana as the country marks the year of return in memory of 400 years since the first slave ship landing in Virginia. An African-American professor of African Studies, Tani Sanchez from Los Angeles, went on a heritage tour with her daughter this August to honor her ancestors and find her roots. CGTN's Wilkester Nyabwa has the story.
They have gone to Ghana in search of their roots. Professor Tani Sanchez and her daughter Tani Sylvester are making this trip in honor of Sanchez's great-great-grandmother, Mary Ann Moss, who was born into slavery in Alabama around 1838. Moss was married to a black Union soldier named Charles Wright. DNA testing showed a direct link between Wright and the Ashanti ethnic group in Ghana. And now, as she listens to the drum beats welcoming her to Ghana, Sanchez weeps. This is her homecoming.
I feel much more connected, and I look at people and I say, oh my goodness. That could have been, these people could be related to me. These people probably knew my grandmother's grandmother's grandmother. I mean, it blows me away.
Sanchez spent a long time researching her ancestry, a quest which she compiled into a published book. In such cases, historians often reach dead ends due to a lack of personal records. It was genetic testing that gave Sanchez and others like her hope that DNA could shed light on their family's long-lost origins. Now she hopes to locate the exact family that she belonged to. During the ceremony, she met Ashanti chief Nana Boakye and asked him if he could do a genetic test to find out if they share any genetic links. He agreed.
You want to take a vertical shot? Okay.
For Sanchez's 40-year-old daughter, the visit to Asin Manso River, where slaves took a final bath before imprisonment on the coast, was a transformative experience.
We're retracing the footsteps of our ancestors, exactly. I mean, there's something, it's there's something healing about that.
They also visited the harrowing Cape Coast Castle, where slaves were chained and organized into dungeons before walking through the door of no return to board the ships.
Thinking of the same route they took and how they must have felt going to a new world and not really understanding anything. And here I am 400 years later and I'm free. So for me, this whole trip has been about holding my head up high, being bold and courageous, and honoring them because they paved the way for me.
When the tour ends, they will return to the United States, but this, they are convinced, is home. Bulkisanyabwa, CGTN.
To Hong Kong, where the High Court has extended an interim injunction against protesting inside the city's international airport. This comes in time to prevent another airport assembly protesters as they are threatening to hold. Hong Kong civil aviation trade unions earlier issued a joint statement asking for the extension, which was set to expire today. Unlawful assembly paralyzed the airport last week. Nearly 1,000 flights were canceled or delayed, and thousands of people were left stranded. The airport later fired 2 employees over suspicions they leaked security information to the protesters. The personal information of over 1,600 Hong Kong police officers and their families has been illegally disclosed online. The leak started in June when the ongoing protests began. Authorities on Thursday said the people who revealed the officers' personal information will face serious consequences.
We shall take decisive action against illegal acts that disturb peace and threaten residents' lives. We condemn such irresponsible acts that ignore the safety and freedom of others.
Wildfires have raged for weeks in Brazil's Amazon, the world's largest tropical rainforest, which produces around 20% of the oxygen on Earth. Its protection is critical to the fight against climate change. But the Brazilian government says it doesn't have enough resources to combat the growing number of wildfires in the Amazon. Luracia Franco reports from Rio de Janeiro.
Dramatic images captured in several Amazonian states this week follow new data reported by Brazil's Space Research Agency showing wildfires have hit record numbers. In a year that authorities say has seen relatively consistent and abundant rainfall, over 72,000 fires have been detected, an 84% increase compared with the same period in 2018, and the highest number since the agency began tracking fires in 2013. On Monday, smoke from the fires was so intense it blackened the sky over Brazil's largest city, São Paulo, 2,700 kilometers away. Critics blame President Jair Bolsonaro's pro-agriculture policies that they say have turned a blind eye to deforestation in the Amazon rainforest, especially by deliberate burning. But the president, offering no evidence, had a different take on the matter.
The fires in the Amazon, from my understanding, could be intensified by NGOs who are losing money, with the intention of bringing problems to Brazil.
In the northern city of Salvador, which is hosting a UN regional meeting on climate change, hundreds of protesters took to the streets to voice their anger against Bolsonaro's comments.
His speech is very irresponsible. He has to prove what he's saying, that the NGOs are the ones setting the fires in the Amazon.
The figures and images showing the rainforest covered by smoke have shocked the world and triggered a global social media frenzy. Scientists warn that rampant deforestation may be pushing the Amazon to a point of no return. Soon, they say, the forest may no longer be able to generate its own rain to sustain its complex ecosystems, which normally absorb millions of tons of the world's CO2 emissions, and that would be catastrophic. While the Amazon burns, Bolsonaro insists Brazil's economy will take off once the country has extracted its rainforest riches. Germany and Norway have already suspended donations to Brazil's Amazon Fund after a surge of deforestation, and many fear an even wider backlash. Lucrecia Franco, CGTN, Rio de Janeiro.
You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. We've got your business news coming up next. Let's take a sneak peek at the headlines. Egypt's Monetary Policy Committee cuts rates for the first time in 6 months after inflation relief. And Kenya's Safaricom achieves 50% share of female employees.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Egypt's Monetary Policy Committee has cut the central bank's overnight interest rate, overnight lending rate, and the rate of the main operation by 150 basis points to 14.25%, 15.25%, and 14.75% respectively. The discount rate was also cut by 150 basis points to 14.75%. The CBE said the recent decline in the local inflation figures is one of the reasons behind the decision, adding that the annual headline and core inflation continued to decline to a record 5.9% in July 2019, the lowest rate in almost 4 years, notwithstanding the recently implemented fiscal consolidation measures that reached cost recovery for most fuel products. The government of Zambia plans to secure a credible investor for the Konkola copper mines. This will commence once the Zambian court finalizes the processes over the liquidation of the mine. There has been a dispute between the government and Nta Resources since May following the appointment of a liquidator to run the mines. State-owned mining company Zambia Consolidated Copper Mines Investment Holdings owns 20% of the Konkola copper mines, whilst the rest of the shares is held by Nta Resources. Well, South African consumer price inflation dropped from 4.5% in June to 4.0% in July. That's lower than the economist's median expectation, and also the lowest reading since March 2018. And that's despite a 10.4% electricity price increase in July. CGTN's Angela Coppola has more on that story.
For cash-strapped South Africans, a moderation in food price inflation from 3.2% in June to 3% in July was welcomed. However, the cost of food production was up by around 5.7% in June.
I'm not seeing prices coming down. Like just going into a store which is only like 500 rands, you walk out with a few items. You know, as much as inflation has decreased, VAT rate is still 15%, and that still puts a high price on the products that we buy. I'm not seeing any difference. Things are expensive, and it's just, survival of the fittest.
The central bank said it expects headline inflation to average around 4.4% this year and 5.1% in 2020. Given the inflation outlook, analysts say that the SARB is not expected to make any changes to its lending rates over the next 12 months.
We're not going to notice a difference in our shopping baskets. We're also not going to notice a difference in restaurant prices when we go out to eat. We're not going to notice a difference in petrol prices. It doesn't get passed down to the consumer. We're just going to be paying more and not less every month.
And based on the central bank's view on the limited value of reducing interest rates as a tool to stimulate the local economy, there is also no real possibility of seeing any interest rate changes anytime soon. While the most recent inflation number is lower than expectations, people still aren't on the streets or buying anything because they have less disposable income. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Safaricom says it has achieved 50% share of female employees on its payroll. This comes amid an increase in the number of direct and indirect jobs it sustained in the last financial year, growing 9% to 979,000. This is according to the telco's 2019 Sustainable Business Report released on Thursday, in which the firm also announced a plan to plant 5 million trees in the next 5 years as part of a carbon offset program. In the year under review, the firm says 178 women-owned businesses were pre-qualified under its Women in Business initiative. The firm supports 167,083 M-Pesa agents, 433 dealers, 1,138 suppliers, 4,503 permanent employees, as well as other stakeholders. The company had a staff headcount of 6,323 as at March 2019, and an increase from 6,130 in 2018. And African governments are increasingly looking at ways of reducing over-reliance on hydroelectricity. Here in Kenya, the use of biogas is expanding to include not only households, but also businesses and large institutions seeking to meet their energy costs. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy brings us more.
International, regional and national stakeholders meeting in Nairobi are working towards supporting the biodigester sector in Kenya. Under the theme, Investing in Biodigester Technology for a Greener Economic Transformation, experts echoed the need for innovative mechanisms that can help families access clean and affordable energy.
We need to emphasize on training. When proper training is done, you can be sure we are going to have proper awareness and the product will be able to be pushed up.
Kenya is currently working towards a commercially viable domestic biogas sector that would contribute towards food security, clean, sustainable use of energy and environmental conservation. Rose Kiarie is a resident of Kiambu and one among an increasing number of Kenyan dairy farmers who are turning to green energy to power their farms. Kiarie is using the gas generated using cow dung to power her farm and light her home, cook food in the kitchen and boil water in the bathroom.
I don't use electricity to boil bath in water. I use biogas to boil my water. I also use biogas to boil water for cooking, so it really helps me a lot.
We ventured into biogas as a pilot project with 300 women that come into cooperative society, and the lives seem to have changed a lot in the last 3 years.
Kiarie mixes water and cow dung from the dairy unit, which is put into a biodigester from where it's broken down to produce methane. She also uses the waste from the biogas unit to grow her crops, including maize and mangoes, making the dairy enterprise a very profitable venture. Sub-Saharan Africa continues to suffer from a major energy crisis, with hundreds of millions of people lacking access to electricity and clean cooking fuels. The Kenyan Biogas now envisions all Kenyan households accessing and utilizing green energy for their homes and organic fertilizer for their farm as one of the ways of protecting the environment. But challenges still remain, as many find the initial installation cost expensive. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Denmark's Lego is investing $150 million until 2030 to create bricks that are not harmful to the environment. Its first plant-based components were released in 2018. But now the company is introducing an eco-friendly set, which has got Lego fans going gaga. CGTN's Julie Shire has more.
For years, this is what Lego bricks have looked and felt like. These building blocks have kept children entertained for generations. The much-loved toy brick company is now trying to save the planet, one little piece at a time.
Lego released its first plant-based kit just weeks ago. It's made up of 3,000 pieces, and all of the botanical features are made from eco-friendly plastic.
So this is the Lego Ideas Treehouse that was released internationally on the 1st of August. And you can see that all of these top elements, which in the set are leaves, but are actually made out of cane and are completely biodegradable. And there are more plant elements around the set and even here in some of the detail of the set.
Lego produces billions of components every year, which travels to over 40 markets. It's hoping to transform its production line in the next 10 years.
So Lego's strategy by 2030 is to have all of their components that we use to build the sets with completely sustainable by the year 2030. And by the year 2025, to have all packaging and elements of the packaging completely sustainable and biodegradable.
Lego is an important learning tool for millions of children. It's an equally fun hobby for adults. But don't throw away the iconic blocks just yet, because they still fit perfectly with the new components.
I think it's a very clever idea because it doesn't harm anyone or anything. It's very creative, and if you forget how to build it, you can just think of a new idea.
Plastic Lego bricks have been around for 50 years. They are passed down through generations and seldom end up in landfill sites. But should one of the new eco-friendly blocks land in the trash, it will disappear a lot sooner than plastic. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
We've got your sports news coming up on CGTN Africa Live. Here's a look at what's ahead. Ghanaians remember late Black Star striker Junior Agogo.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born.